Can you let me know because I can't say thanks. All right. So, guys, thank you for joining and coming on. And I'm sure we'll do a little bit of an intro because hopefully in the next sort of 15-30 seconds there'll be more people jumping on. But it was quite encouraging that a lot of people that we deal with found that the topic's very relevant. So we're trying to be very broad in the sense of having valuable information for buyers, first home buyers, investors and developers. So what we're trying to do is look at COVID-19, the impacts having on prices, and basically we're going to look at the long-term effects and where we're going to end up, the medium term and the short term, and then we'll be able to comment on that. So a little bit about myself. My name's Andrew Fanatis. My company's Property Association, and basically we've been around since 2008. We do work for developers, we do some consulting work, we've done work for councils, and I just thought it would be inappropriate if we didn't comment, because we're dealing with a lot of people. We're in a little bit of uncertain times and something new in terms of the situation we're facing. So one quick disclaimer: the Australian property market, it's a big market. So it's made up of big cities, it's made of small cities, and it's also made up of regional areas. So they don't all operate exactly the same. So if one's going up, they're not all going up, and so forth. But we're going to focus on Sydney, Melbourne. They're the big boys. They're the big clogs that turn the marketplace. So what we'll be talking about is looking more in terms of those two big markets. The other thing we want to say is that we're not here trying to forecast what's going to happen. You know, we don't have a crystal ball, we can't see, but what we want to do is we want to look at the fundamentals. We want to look at the main things in terms of the property market. What drives it? Are they still there, or has COVID-19 sort of blown everything to the smithereens? So in terms of that, the main thing that we need to understand is, at the moment, what are we dealing with here? What are we dealing with? We are dealing with a virus. It's a serious virus. There, I touched my eye. I shouldn't have. It is highly contagious. It is transferable from person to person. It is deadly, and we don't have a cure. So in terms of what we're dealing with, that's that in a snapshot. And what we have to try and navigate through is what does this mean for our property market? What does this mean for property prices? For me as a buyer, for me as an investor, for someone as a developer, you know, what does all this mean? And all we can do is, as I said, we don't have a crystal ball, but what we can do and what we do have is hindsight. We can get an understanding of what we're going through right now. It is the first time that we have experienced something like this. But if we look back at over history, and I'm not going to go way back, but 40 years is a good gap. Late 70s, early 80s, there was a global recession. Things were tough. People were again talking about property prices. In 1981, AIDS hit, and that was devastating. People were very frightened at the time. It took a decade to develop, some sort of slowdown of its impact, and it wasn't even until this year that there was a cure. And all up, over the 40 years, it's killed 35 million people. So something that really rocked us for the first time globally. In 1987, we had Black Monday in terms of the US share market, dropped more than 20% in one day, sent the whole global economy going sideways. And in terms of the Australian market, in 2 days that lost over 28%. So that was something, again, on a global scale. People were talking about the economy being blown, things never recovering, so on and so forth. 1990, we had the Japanese market sort of crash, and the property market in Japan has never recovered since. So the prices from the peak there are very similar to what they are now. But again, what we're doing here tonight is trying to put context to everything and understand that Japan, is one of the very few places in the world where the population is reducing, and that's what plays in terms of that. It was the recession we had to have in 1990, 2001. It was, I've never seen it before, and I don't think I'll see it since. There was two airplanes flew straight into buildings, and Enron crashed as well, and we started the war on terror. And whoever can remember that, these were things we were thinking, wow, wow, I can't believe this is happening during my lifetime. I can't believe I'm witnessing this during my lifetime. 2003 SARS, 2008 we had the subprime in America, which led to the GFC, and all everyone was saying, property bubble's it's burst, it's gone, capitalism's gone, it's shattered everything. 2009 we had the swine flu that infected something like 1.4 billion people. 2016 Trump got elected, and there was again experts saying that markets would be shocked globally, and so on and so forth. So I'm not here trying to downplay COVID-19 at all. I'm not one of those people that says, oh, but did you know this many people died from this, and did you know this many people died from that? It is a very, very, very serious virus. It has a high mortality rate. We don't know that much about it. We don't have a cure. We need to take it seriously. But at the same time, the media is driving an agenda which is instilling fear, and what we're trying to do is just put a bit of context in there. I'll just grab something quickly. So this is just a graph, so you can see it. Basically, it shows from 1997. This is for Sydney market up until the peak of 2017. It shows the ups and downs. The blue's houses, the black is apartments. And I was going to read just basically every downturn was basically afterwards it went up a lot more than the down, and then once every decade it went up more than 50%. So I'm just going to rattle off the numbers just quickly. So this is for apartments. From 2000 to 2004 the market went up 61%. From 2004 to 6 down 9. I'm just rounding these up. From 06 to 08 up 11, then down 8, then up 19, down 4, up 59, down 4, up 20, and that was back up to the peak of 2017. Came down about 13-14% from there, and we were basically from late last year back on that up turn, basically ready to see those strong growth figures again. We're probably back up to around that 10% up, and obviously now COVID-19's hit, bang, it's chopped the market. But the point we want to take is when we're looking and considering in terms of what could happen, we need to put into perspective that yes, this is very serious. This is something that we've never seen before. We don't have a cure, but it is not the first time in our existence or in the last 40 years that these major events have happened, and all the experts have come out to say, markets are going to die, crash, so on and so forth. So that's the first thing that we need to really appreciate and understand. In terms of, and it'd be really good if there's people that are watching right now, if you want to make a comment like FH for first home buyer, or I for investor, or D for developer, just so I've got an idea of who is tuning in, so we can basically use the appropriate language and try and focus on the right areas, because we're not going to reinvent the wheel here. We're not going to basically come up with new strategies or anything in terms of something you've never heard before, but we want to dig into the particulars and assess what it means for prices. So the next thing we've looked at the incident, we know what we're facing, it's something that we've never seen before, it is major, it is going to have a big impact. So now let's look at what is those elements that impact property prices. And the first thing that does play a big part are wages and employment. And right now, COVID-19, we know how many people have lost their jobs. It's taken a massive, sledgehammer to our basically employment, that outlook for the economy. Yes, the government's come in with huge stimulus to try and make sure that people can stay, in a job, earn something. But that is probably one of the biggest things we need to watch in terms of the property market recovering from this is employment. Now, a lot of people that have been talking about property bubbles for the last 10, 20 years, they've been talking about property prices increasing at a rate that's more than wages. And they're just saying, how can you possibly have property prices continuing to increase when wages are not keeping up with those prices? That makes sense. But they're looking at it basically from one particular buyer. Thanks, Hannah, for letting us know that you're first home buyer, mate. Appreciate it. Excellent, Ting. Thank you. So when they're looking at it from that one angle, it makes sense. property prices go up, wages don't go up, it's not affordable, price is going to come back down. But when you step back and you look at the whole picture, you start to realize that for the average person who's got a, say, $500,000 loan, $500,000 loan, and they've seen interest rates drop by 2% over the last couple of years, that person now is paying $10,000 a year less on that loan. So just think about that. Somebody on $70,000 takes $55,000 home, and now instead of $10,000 coming off that 55, they've got it. So it's basically an artificial increase to their wage. They've got 18% more to play with. So it's not just as simple as saying, oh, prices go up and wages aren't keeping up. We need to look at the whole economy, and the interest rates play a huge part. Now, what's worrying is that we're at a point where the interest rates can't really get much lower. So in terms of historic, I'll just show you quickly. So this is just like a quick sheet of all the different rates. But what I want to say is you see 1990, okay, and 17.5%. So we all know parents, grandparents say, oh, when I had property, I was paying 17%. Yeah, you were. Your wages were also relative to house prices much higher back then. It all connects. And then as you keep going down, you'll see we get to where we are now, which is basically 0.25%. And the reality is, it's going to drop. It's going to drop more. It's going to drop to zero. Now, can it go into negatives? And that's how it keeps going? We don't know. But the balance in the economy, see, we all understand that in nature there's a balance. The beautiful thing about economics is that in economics there's a balance as well. That demand and supply and so on and so forth, there's a balance there. And so you can see why towards the end of last year the property prices started to creep up, because our interest rates kept falling and our wages, they hadn't gone up, but they hadn't really come down. So the affordability for housing was going up. And we could see that trend coming through. It's really, I'm glad to see that people watching are really broad. We've got developers and brokers and first home buyers. So hopefully we keep it at a level that keeps everybody informed, and not where they miss it, but not where they say, oh, I've seen all this. So that wage and that the jobs is really critical. But so far we've been doing well. And if you look at where we've been, and we will look at the property cycle very soon, you could see why the market was in that position of growth. The next thing that's really important sounds very simple, demand and supply. But if you look at the demand, what are we talking about? We're talking about migration. Okay, people coming here, there's more demand, population growth is part of that. We also look at changing family structures and wealth. So I'm doing okay, I don't need a 2-bedroom, but I'm going to buy or rent one because I can. That places the demands. I'm growing as a family, I want something bigger, there's people coming from overseas. That demand side of things, if we look at COVID-19 and as it starts to get into the long term where it's finishing off, you'd have to say that demand for migration to Australia will be very high. We've handled this very well, like everything else. Our reputation globally is fantastic. And it is a shame, because I tell people all the time, unfortunately, Sydney, Melbourne, they're global cities. They're cities that are highly, highly desirable. And because of that, our population keeps growing, demand for housing keeps going up, because people have to live somewhere. The other side of the equation is your supply. So if you look at your supply, it's really determined by government. Is government releasing enough land? Is government rezoning things? Is that provides supply? Developments constructing, that provides supply. We can see that at the back end of 2017 into 2018 that we had an oversupply of apartments, Melbourne, Sydney, and that really started to suppress the market because we just didn't have the people to put into those properties. So in terms of property prices, that demand and supply is critical in determining where they go. The next thing is buyer sentiment. So what I think, what you think, if I'm in the market, if your friend's in the market, what we think drives the market. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is why another impact on that is the media. What the media does and how the media makes us feel impacts greatly because it impacts our sentiment. So if the media is telling us be scared, be worried, okay, then that's gonna play on us, and then we're gonna act that, and the domino effect happens. All we have to look at is at the end of 2018 with Opal Tower in Sydney Olympic Park, the media grabbed that and just didn't let go. And a few months later, they jumped on Mascot, and they really, for 12 to 18 months, really pushed that agenda of building quality, but almost made people think that these buildings were going to fall down on top of them. But nowhere did the media actually look at the facts. And this is why I'm saying the best thing you can do right now is be educated. Get all the facts. Nobody said, oh, there was 300,000 apartments delivered in Sydney over the last 5 years, and there's been a handful of issues. No. Nobody said that the Mascot building was problematic for years, and that they had come to an agreement with the developer for a payout, but didn't invest that money back in the building. The media, which also impacts what you and I think, drive agendas, and that also impacts property prices. Global events is something else that impacts what we think, how we feel, and obviously Corona and COVID-19 is one of those, and we can see that now. We can see that manifesting in front of our eyes. So that'll have a big impact on pricing. The other element, which is huge, are the banks. So when the banks are basically pumping money into housing and the economy and giving people loans, you can see that was part of that market getting so hot from 2012 onwards, because they were just aggressively lending. The Royal Commission came in, they brought out some rules, they started to pull back a little bit, but the banks have a really big part to play when it comes to what happens with our property prices. So we understand what we're facing here. This global virus, it's spreading, we don't know much about it, it's deadly, and now we understand what are those elements that impact property prices. So we've got to start to see how they connect. Before we do that, just give me a second. I want to quickly talk about tick-tock, the property clock. So I just want to show you, this basically highlights the cycle in property. So 12 o'clock is the boom, and the bottom is 6 o'clock, and then 3 o'clock is basically our declining market, and 9 o'clock is our rising market. And in between are all these things that happen. So you can see that when the market's at its peak, our stock levels are really high because everybody wants to cash in on making money. And then as it starts to drop, we've got an oversupply of stock, it gets harder to get money, and then we find that it's a decreasing confidence in consumers, which leads to people not putting their properties on the market, which then consumers' confidence is low, and we all start to save money. And basically, it drives the market. So what you and I do, what we think, what the banks are doing, all these elements, it drives that property clock. So where we were at that bottom bit where people had said, I'm not putting my property on the market. The market's not good enough in 2019. And we could see that reduction of supply starting to bring auction clearance rates up. In those major cities, we started to see a really strong recovery, and the beginning of this year was really strong because we had the banks easing up a little bit in terms of their lending policy, so money going into the system. We had consumer confidence going up because they can see prices going up. We still didn't have that much stock in the marketplace, and what COVID-19's done is basically pump the brakes on that. It's taken it to the point now where boom, we've gone straight past the peak was, say, 3 weeks ago. We're now back into that declining market because we don't have confidence. The banks are saying, I don't know, should I give you money? Don't I give you money? Are you going to have your job tomorrow? Aren't you going to have your job tomorrow? So I'm sure the banks are assessing people now based on their industry and the likelihood of them keeping or not keeping their job. And that's where we are in the cycle. So it's important to understand how it all interconnects. So in terms of what we've seen change in the property market over the last 4 weeks, property is huge. In Australia, property is huge. In terms of an asset, in terms of people wanting to own a property, it is something that for us is on the agenda. If you're a true blue Aussie, owning a property is on the agenda. Okay? But unfortunately, a killer virus supersedes that. And that's basically what's happened in the last 4 weeks. We've gone from a really confident market that's seeing that oversupply that we had in 18 and 19 started to dry up, that competition was driving prices up, that positive sentiment be overtaken by this disease. So I agree. Nathan's just said the media have a lot to answer for, and is 100% right. You know, only because it's give us the facts, educate us, help us navigate through such a difficult time. Do not hype it up, because when we are hyped and when we are stressed, it is when we make our worst decisions. Anytime you've made a dumb decision, I guarantee you're under pressure. And the media is definitely adding to that. So in terms of the last 4 weeks, we've seen obviously COVID-19 take priority in our lives. People are trying to assess what this all means, what's going to happen. We're seeing our open homes in terms of advertising times to come. We're not allowed to do that anymore in the industry. We've got to do by appointment, which is okay. Everyone's adapted to that, I think, quite well. It is a little bit challenging when you could run a half an hour open, get 10 groups through, and now you're looking at 4 to 5 hours to try and get those people through. But we need to do what we need to do to defeat this COVID-19. We're down to 2 people doing anything, so we can only have 2 people come and see us for inspections. And obviously that social distancing is something that's been put in place, and a lot of people working from home. So really, our industry as property hasn't been hit that hard in terms of the last 4 weeks, in terms of operation. We're still doing our opens, we're still ticking away, people are still seeing brokers. So it's quite interesting in that regard. But what it's done is it's smashed confidence. It's just smashed confidence in the last 4 weeks in the property market. And being somebody that's basically at the front line, I'm talking to buyers all the time, I'm talking to developers all the time. You know, everybody was really looking and wanting to jump in. Just seeing what Rod said now. 100% Rod, more education, yeah. And that's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to say everything's rosy, okay? We're not trying to say that COVID-19 is not serious. But we're trying to say educate, understand, don't miss that opportunity. Because I can tell you, if it wasn't for real estate, okay, I would be a lot worse off. I wouldn't have many freedoms that I have. Yeah, is it a little bit stressful right now as a landlord? Yeah, it is. I'm not going to lie, but it's not all rosy, you know. But at the end, you're going to look back and say, wow, this is the best thing I did jumping into property. And for people that own that, they can see that. I don't think you'd talk to anyone who purchased a property during 1987 Black Monday. I'll tell you a quick story. A client of mine at the moment, back then, was a real estate agent in Fairfield. And he was telling me actually today, he said to me, I remember vividly 1987 Black Monday, because the conversation was very similar to now, very similar to now. And he said, I had a house for sale and I finally sold it for $70,000. Now that house today is worth $750 any day of the week, even right now. So, you know, that fear that the media is putting into us, we need to check it and we need to put it into perspective. So in terms of that confidence falling, we sort of turn back and we look now at property prices. So what does that mean during COVID-19? And I've broken it up into short term, which is sort of 6 to 12 weeks, mid, which is 3 to 9 months, and then long term, which is 9 to 18 months. So that to me is where we're going to be at. We're gonna really feel some short impact in the next 3 months. The next 3 to 9 months, we're going to see some changes. And then the 9 to 18 months, you know, is maybe how long it will take for us to get back to that full normality that we knew of. And so in terms of the short term, the things that we need to consider is, right now, people are trying to assess what's going on. People are trying to assess, is my job safe? How's my homeschooling going? You know, there's people at home now working full time and teaching 3 kids. Okay, shout out to my wife for doing that. So it is very challenging for us to even understand where we're at. So right now, if you've got money, if you've got lots of money and you're ready to transact, you can get a good deal, because the average Joe is really just trying to process, where am I at right now? So there are definite opportunities to be had right now. The main thing is, I'm just reading a quick question from Maria. So is now a good time to, look, in terms of buying a home right now, it is a great time to negotiate. It is a great time because the people that are selling now, they're feeling the pinch. They are feeling the pinch. And I'm telling you, this fall, it's going to be quick, it's going to be sharp, but it's going to bottom out very quickly. And the reason for that is you have to remember that we just went, in Sydney and Melbourne and major cities, we just went through a really, really difficult period for 2018 and 2019. You know, prices fell about 13.5%. It was actually the second biggest drop in our sort of cycles in since they've kept records. So a lot of people that had to get out, they're already out. They've gone out of the market. They've made the decision to cash in. They couldn't hold on, and they've already jumped out. Yes, there's going to be some people right now, but you've got to remember, only a year ago, only 2 years ago, people were jumping out. So that bottoming is going to come really, really, really quick. And so I would say, if you've got the money and you're not overly fussed, because I'm telling you, your options will run out. So Maria, you're asking if it's a good time? Yeah, it is. But I can guarantee you, in 4 to 5 weeks, the options you have will start to run out. You have to remember that the banks have come out and said, we're going to give you a 6-month grace period on your interest. So the number of people that have to sell is not going to be high, because they're all going to at least get 6 months. And I don't know about you, but if I had the option of giving my house away for nothing or really cheap, or holding out for 6 months and seeing what could happen, I'm going to hold out for 6 months and see what can happen. So definitely now is a really good time to jump in, but I can tell you it's going to be short-lived and your options are going to reduce almost. You've probably got 2 more weeks of people putting properties on because they're in that panic mode now. The media's really stirred them up. They're going to rush to put their properties on the market, but then they're going to start to think, hang on, I can ask my bank for 6 months to breathe here. And you know what? Our numbers are coming down. I'm going to wait. I'm going to ask the bank for 6 months. And if you think about it, the banks, which I'm not a big fan of, they are doing this, and the government's saying, oh, thank you to the banks. I don't think that. I think the bank right now, they don't want your property. If you've got a property that's not tenanted, they don't want your property. They know they can't sell the property right now. So they're giving you the 6 months so they can load up your loan, but they know that in 6 months it's going to be a better time for them to make that decision. Do I want your property now? So all I'm saying is that the short term, yes, there are bargains out there, but if you're not fussy as an investor, go negotiate hard. If you're buying from a mum and dad, that's just how it is. You buy shares at someone else's loss. You can buy property at someone else's loss as well. One thing I'd say though, if you're buying brand new, be careful. If you're buying brand new and you've got a developer out there who's willing to bend over backwards and give you anything off the price, you have to ask yourself, is that developer going to be around in 12 months if my building needs something done to it? Who cares about getting $20,000 or $30,000 off right now if in 18 months' time there's work that needs to be done to that building and that developer's not around? We need to be educated. We need to understand the bigger picture. But that's the short term. I can't see many new developments starting in the next sort of 3 months. I think everyone's going to, developer-wise, sit and just see what's going to happen. If people are building already, they're going to try and finish and see this out and sell on completion. So Colin can't hear anything. Just 1 second. Colin, maybe if you click on your speaker, mate, and you can hear something, that let us know if you're still stuck. In terms of the midterm, so this is now the 3 to 9 month period. What I can see is that, as I said, it's going to bottom out. And in terms of that, people are going to say, guess what? I'm not putting my property on the market now. Why would I put my property on the market now at this low price? So we're going to start seeing the supply dry up in the midterm. Okay, we're not going to have that many transactions because we're going to get into that stalemate that we experienced probably towards the end of 2018, where the buyer's like, no, I've got the power, and the property owners are saying, well, I just won't sell, and that stalemate of I've got the power because I've got the money, and the owner saying, well, I just won't sell, that stalemate traditionally breaks by the buyer giving in. And then when the buyer gives in and pays the price, the next guy says, geez, I better give in, and I give in, and then boom, 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 and the prices start to go up. So in the medium term, we can see that there's going to be, I can see a little bit of growth. And again, it's going to be off the back of a reduction in stock. That reduction in property on the market, you're going to see auction rates in Melbourne and Sydney start going up again. So that's the medium side of it. And then the long term, which is the 9 to 18 months, we're going to see confidence coming back. We're going to see confidence coming back in. We're going to see confidence coming back into the marketplace because the fundamentals of property, and this is the next question is, will the fundamentals of property change post-COVID-19? But long term, I don't think they will. We're still going to need housing. There's only a few things that we all need. It's food, housing. They're the main things. And guess what? I think we're all going to realise that. We're going to realise that even more than ever during this lockdown period. And what we're going to find is we're going to find a new demographic. We're going to find a new market of people who at the end of this are going to say, I've got 25 grand saved because I couldn't eat out, because I couldn't go party, because I couldn't go do my drugs. That's the truth. These people are going to have $25,000 saved, and they're going to say, a portion are going to say, hey, woo, I'm going to go party, I'm going to blow it. But even if 20%, if 2 out of 10 people say, this is my opportunity to buy property, they're going to jump in. And that's a new demographic that didn't exist before because these people weren't great at managing their money. So the long term is definitely going to see some positive growth. And what we're going to find towards the long term is that all this oversupply of property in Melbourne and Sydney, it's going to be soaked up. Because I know a lot of developers at the moment who are saying, well, if I can't get my prices, I'm just going to rent these out. Because the rental demand is still high. So what they're going to do is rent them out, and then come 9, 10, 12 months time, when people realise that this is under control, we might even have a vaccine by then, they're not going to have the options. And when you don't have the options then, it's going to be pay a premium for whatever's around or secure something off the plan. So we can see that the market, as long as our population is increasing and as long as we get some fundamental employment happening and out of COVID-19, we are going to have new industries or old industries being reborn. We're going to have all this innovation happening because we're amazing like that. As humans, we come up with all these things, and especially now that we've got some downtime. When's the last time we had some downtime? Just see what Mary's asking here. Yeah, so well, there you go. 20k access to super, that helps for a deposit too. Hopefully people can take the 20 grand from their super and make sure they pay their landlords as well. And Rod's right. Off the plan is something where if you've got a history of that developer, and that developer has delivered for 15, 20 years, solid properties. And it's very easy. You know what I would do right now if I was buying off the plan? I'd say, hey, can I get a strata report from a property that this guy built 8 years ago? Because right now, you can buy something that's finishing in 2 years' time at today's prices, maybe even 5 or 10 grand underneath. So it's all about the cycle and where it's going. And it's not always easy. And Ankit, yeah, mate, yeah, it's not that easy always to pull out your super. I know that too. But in terms of the long term, I think we're going to start to definitely see that growth kick up, and we're going to pick up from where we were in February and March. So the last question we've got is, post COVID-19, will the fundamentals of property change? Is what is happening right now so globally massive that it's going to change the core fundamentals of property? I can't see it. And we started off talking about all these major events over the last 40 years. You can't break the fundamentals of economics, because economics are based on demand and supply. It's quite simple. You can stuff it up. You can stuff it up big time with the GFC and all the subprime loans and giving money to people that shouldn't have got it. You can make a royal mess of it, but you can't break it. So what we're trying to educate here is to say, learn what makes property tick. We've gone through some of those things, like we said, wages and employment and demand and supply and so on and so forth. Learn what makes property tick. Make an educated decision. And in the long term, I'll just show you something quickly. So in 2018, Aussie Home Loans and CoreLogic did a document. It was a 25-year document from 1993 to 2018, and it looked at how much we've borrowed, prices, the whole bit. And at the end of it, they just said, okay, if property does between 1993 and 2018, if it does between 2019, and 2043, what it did between 93 and 18, this is where we would be with house values. See Sydney, average median prices $6.3 million. Melbourne, $5.8 million. Let's look at apartments. This is if the market did between 2019 and 2043 what it did between 93 and 18. Sydney apartments median 3.4. Melbourne 2.8. Now that's not going to happen, okay? That's not going to happen because our interest rates have dropped. There's a few different reasons that's not going to happen. But even if it's half, let's look again. If it's half of what it did, the median Sydney price is 3.17. Melbourne is 2.9. So you that's half of what happened between 93 and 18, between 19 and 43. That's where we'll be at. So it's more about just being educated. If there's any more questions, let us know. I'm here to answer those. If there's more topics that you would like us to talk about, we don't want to go on and on and on. We just want to really get punchy, and hopefully there's been something for everyone to take away from tonight. There is a lot that's unclear. Hannah's asking, when do you think prices will go up again? I think in the medium term, in the 3 to 9 months from now, we're going to see prices go up 2 to 3% off the back of a reduction of supply and the reserve rate being zero. You know, so it is very difficult. Yeah, Peter's saying what people bought the prices for. Yeah, it is insane. But we have to understand that it's the power of basically reducing interest rate, and that's it. That's the question that we're raising. The question I'm saying is, okay, we're almost out of rope in terms of dropping our rates, but there's nothing to say the economy can't continue with negative rate and so on and so forth. So in terms of where we're going to go, we can only use the past as a guide and use hindsight in our favour because we don't have a crystal ball. So I thank you for tuning in. If there's any topics that you would like us to address, I just felt that this was one that was on people's minds. I've got a lot of first home buyers who are tossing up, do I jump in or not? I can't answer that question for you, but I can educate you. I can provide you information and I can answer all your questions, because that's what I believe, being in the industry for as long as I have been, having bought as many properties as I have, it's something that I can easily do, but you've got to make that decision with education, not with media hype and media fear being pumped into us the way they are. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Any questions before I go? Peter? Exactly, Peter. That's right. Peter just said, with home loans paused for 6 months, there'll be no stock on the market and record low rates. You know what's going to happen? My gut feeling, Peter, is it's going to go up, mate. Helen, will this increase supply? So what about expats selling primary residence by June 30? Yeah, there is a big expat market, but I don't believe it's one that's going to rock the supply, and that June period falls in the midterm, that midterm between 3 and 9 months. And I can tell you for sure, coming into September, October, there's going to be a very, very low stock levels, and you'll see the clearance rates come back up again. So there's, and as I said, there's many elements to the property market. It's not just black and white, very simple. It is complex. But the question we have to ask ourselves is, are the fundamentals there? What are people going to turn to after the share market has been destroyed the way it has? the share market, traditionally, if you look at the share market and you look at property over 30, 40 years, one's averaged 10.7% return, the other's averaged 10.2. They're almost identical. But one thing that is sure is every time the stock market crashes, property prices go up. Now, is that going to be an anomaly? Yeah, maybe, but we can only use what we've got in the past. BDP, thank you very much for your comment, buddy. Thank you so much. All right, guys, I'm going to tune out. Cheers. Thanks. Now I've got to work out how to stop these.